series of cancer surgeries, facial reconstruction, and radiation therapy. So he sends his regards. And my role on the project, I am the deputy project manager for the health study, and I've been with UCLA in the Fielding School of Public Health for 15 years as a research program manager. So what I wanted to share tonight, is a little bit, can you guys hear me okay? Yeah. Okay. Was a little bit about my and our team's past involvement as well. So back in 2015, Dr. Jarrett was on the ground. Some of you met him back then, when he was doing air monitoring and different wipe samples in people's homes. And him and Dr. Garcia Gonzalez published some work from their findings back when they were here in 2015-16. I've actually been working with them since that time, so I'm very familiar with what you all have gone through. And actually 9 years ago next week, I led the organization of a symposium dedicated to what was known about this disaster. So that was in November of 2016. So I say this with all honesty, I have been following your stories since the beginning. And while this is not the kind of thing that anybody wants to celebrate, this anniversary, as you've all alluded to, I'm honored to be here tonight with you all. So, I'm trying to get my notes up. Just 1 second. It'll be better if I do. All right, it's not gonna work. All right, so many years later, in December 2022, the UCLA School of Public Health and was awarded the contract to conduct the health study. So in December 2022, we started this 5-year health study, which has 2 really main components to it, which is to understand all of the environmental toxins that came out of the facility at the time and what people were exposed to, so that we could construct the appropriate health evaluation methods to understand the short and the long-term impacts of people who lived through this disaster. So this is just a screenshot of our website, and I see a lot of new faces that I haven't seen at our community meetings, so I invite you to check it out, and you can see more what the study entails, and I'll walk you through some other components as well. So who we are. We are a very large investigative team with some external partners as well, with expertise in environmental health, clinical health research, medicine, disasters, disaster recovery, geographic information sciences, remote sensing, using satellites and planes to monitor air toxics, healthcare systems, and data analytics. And we work very closely with the Scientific Oversight Committee, which is an independent group of multi-sector experts who volunteer their time to give us guidance on our research design methods, how we're implementing, how our progress is going, and interpreting what we're finding. So as I mentioned, there's two main components of this health study. And the first was to understand fully all of the exposures that were emitted into the atmosphere, into the air. So what was released, how far did it go, what neighborhoods were impacted, and how much were people exposed. And so to do this, we utilized some of the data that Dr. Jarrett, our principal investigator, collected in real time. We also had to make requests to a number of agencies who also collected data at the time, like Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, South Coast Air Quality Management District, Public Utilities Commission, and others, and assemble all of that data into a database complemented with our own to understand what had been released and do modeling to understand how far it had traveled at different times throughout the extended blowout, and what scenarios people were impacted under. So this is a breakdown of all of the different sub-studies or components of the exposure assessment. And what's most important to understand is that they all complement one another to tell us the whole picture of what exposure was, and they all feed into the health studies. So the bulk of our work in the first 2 years of the health study, we're now in the 3rd year, was conducting all of these. So we've actually completed the indoor and outdoor air monitoring. Thank you to those of you who volunteered your homes to have monitors in them so that we can understand any ongoing emissions from the facility and its infrastructure. We also did natural gas sampling direct from lines so we can understand really what the gas is made of today. And we used satellite, we pulled satellite imagery from the time of the disaster to understand where the methane plume had gone. And then we also put all of that into what's called a chemical transport model, which also uses a number of on-the-ground station monitors, wind data, a lot of atmospheric chemistry. So everything in green has either been presented at one of our community meetings, or the air monitoring and natural gas will be presented at our next community meeting on November 18th. And the risk assessment, the hazard risk assessment, is in progress because we need data also from the health studies about people's behaviors during the disaster to fully understand different risk scenarios. And the second big bucket or component of the research is the health assessment, which I know has been longer coming than any of you would have wanted. But it is now underway. All gears are turning, and those are all the gears. Come back to this though. But the main purpose of the health assessment was to look not only in real time, but also to collect as much evidence as possible from the archives of cancer data, hospitalization data, looking at what other providers have reported, and so that we could construct the most appropriate methods for understanding the impact on this community's health. So we'll do that. We've been doing the records analysis. We've presented a lot of those already. And now we're starting the work. We'll be, well, actually, we also did focus groups in year 2 of the study. Thank you again to all of you who participated in those. All of that was critical to leading us up to this point in time to collect new data. So these are the main components of the health assessment. On the left is the existing data that I mentioned that we had to request from different agencies. There's a lot that goes into obtaining health data from the state or other bodies. We have at UCLA, as academic researchers, we have a human subjects review board, which after our scientific oversight committee reviewed our research methods and approved them, those same protocols then had to go to a human subjects review board, not only at UCLA, but at the agency who we had requested the data from. So we have received and finished our analysis on birth outcomes. We'll share a little more about what those findings were. And at our last community meeting, we presented our assessment of healthcare utilization and the uptick that we saw there. These other existing data sets, while we have received some data from them, our scientific oversight committee has charged us to gather further years of data, so we have more data in our arsenal to do these analyses. And those are from the Cancer Registry, the California Health Interview Survey, and the neonatal blood spot biomarkers, which will be sent for metabolomic analysis, both targeted and untargeted, which tells us, which traces all chemical constituents throughout the human metabolome over time. All right, so that has all led us to the most exciting part, which is we have begun sending out invitation letters for people to participate in an online health survey We're sending them out in waves, so look in your mailbox for one of them. I actually have some slides on that in a second. And after taking the health survey online, there will be a question that asks you if you want to opt into a clinical assessment. So I'll show you what those envelopes look like, and there's actually a flyer handout up on the table there that you can take to see what a little bit more the survey and the clinical assessments entail. All right, so as I mentioned, we have presented quite a few things to the community in community meetings. And when we present them in the community meetings, those are preliminary results. It usually takes a year after that for the whole academic peer review process before it's published in a journal. So the first results that we've had published from this study were an assessment of the birth outcomes. We had data from the state on all babies born in California, and so we looked at babies that were born to moms that lived within 10 kilometers south of the blowout, where we understand the plume to have traveled. And the unfortunate finding was that women who were exposed in their later stages of pregnancy, the third trimester when the baby is growing the most, had almost a 50% higher than expected chance of having a low birth weight baby. And these are from real birth records, so this isn't just a modeling exercise, this is real births. And low birth weight is a risk factor for later health complications listed on the slide: autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, and adult diseases like hypertension, diabetes, coronary artery disease, and asthma. And one thing that is in the paper, which is in a binder up there if you want to flip through it, that maybe you haven't seen, because this is an analysis that we did at the request of the peer reviewers of the journal. And we split, so this is SS25, this is a 10-kilometer impact zone, and we split it into thirds. Western, southern, and eastern segment. This is a heat map of the births that were in the records that we analyzed. And what we found by splitting this into these different segments was that, oh, that's not going to work. Mothers who lived in the western segment actually had a 1.3 times more, or 130% higher rate of higher than expected low birth weight babies. And then in the middle, 64%, and on the eastern side, that was basically kind of flat. So when you see that 50% higher number that is reported kind of in the headlines, if you dig into the article that's on the table, that's the average across those three segments. So why that's important and why that tracks is that's what we found with the methane plume as well, that it really seemed to go southwest for the most of the time. I have another slide on that there. And this is why we have so many separate studies that complement each other, not because they just sequentially lead us to better information, but because we're looking for consistency across the results, because that really means that what we're seeing is true. If you can come at it from a lot of different angles and you still find the same thing, that's the most powerful kind of evidence that we can have. So this is a new release in terms of our publications. We presented this at a previous community meeting. This is satellite imagery that we have processed. There was 4 or 5 different satellites and an airplane equipped with infrared that made passes over during the disaster. And this is gonna hit the press on Tuesday. So But we presented these results, so you can go to our community meetings page and see the recordings and look at the slides. But what this is, I don't know, turn the lights down, but in the dark black, that's up at the top, that's SS25, and then as the color gets lighter, that's where it becomes a little harder to detect the methane from like ambient concentrations of other things. But what this paper found was that the blowout plume could be detected at least 10 kilometers downwind. So this helps us to refine exactly who was exposed, who we really need to be doing health assessments on. So look for this in the press on Tuesday. And another new release that we have coming up is the release of the focus groups. This has gone through the peer review process and should be hitting the press sometime in November. And I think the most, thank you again for those of you who shared your experiences. One of the most potent findings was this concept of invisibility, how you didn't know what you had been exposed to, that your grievances, your suffering hadn't been heard by anybody. And so with this work, we hope to bring to light all that you've gone through. And another reason the focus groups were so important is it really helped us to understand what indicators we should be looking for when we designed our online health survey. So other findings that we presented were emergency department visits, where we saw an increase during and after the disaster for up to a year, and then it leveled off again. I forgot to mention that with the birth outcomes, that was the same thing. The low birth weight, it upticked severely in babies that were exposed to the disaster or whose mothers were exposed, but then it leveled off back to kind of what it had been before. We also finished our chemical transport model, which I think we presented, and that allows us to show exactly what concentrations that were emitted during the blowout, where they were in what neighborhoods, because then when we have your health survey data, we can say, well, we can look exactly at what you were being exposed to at those times, and it's kind of a dose response. Underlies a dose response type analysis. And we finished our risk assessment framework and have put online our data inventory of over 1,400 data sources that we extracted all of the different values from, whether they were environmental or symptom data, to construct the risk assessment. And then we have a number of studies in progress, and I feel like I'm going over time, so maybe flip along. But we do still have 2 more years of this study, so. And as I alluded to, we have just launched the Survey of Health and Well-Being, which qualifies somebody to also participate in a clinical assessment. And this is what the letter will look like, so please don't throw it away if you get it, and please tell all your neighbors if they get it to please respond. The sooner that people respond, the sooner we can wrap up the data analysis and give you all the answers that you want. As I mentioned, they're going out in waves, batches of a few thousand at a time, just so that we can make sure we're getting enough representation in the neighborhoods that were exposed to the plume, and so that we can see you for a clinical assessment as soon as possible after you take the health survey, because on the health survey you'll be reporting a lot of things about your current health, and we want them to line up as close as possible with the biospecimens we collect. Okay, and during the clinical assessments, we will collect a number of different measures, physical and biospecimens, but most notably a cognitive screening to see if there's any impact from neurotoxins that people were exposed to, a lung function test. We know that that was one of the main symptoms. People reported breathing problems. We're going to see if that has persisted, kind of long-term damage has been done. And then we'll collect blood and urine to run through a series of panels, including the targeted and untargeted metabolomics. On our website, under study overview, study approach, and clinical assessments is a full detail on what the clinical blood assays will entail. And because we're using CLIA certified labs. Every individual that participates will get a readout of their lab results. So you can take that back to your primary care physician if you would like. So I invite you to our community meeting on November 18th. But if you want to catch up, you can go to the community page where we have recordings and the slides from all of our past meetings. And I hope to see you on November 18th in this room at 6 p.m. So thank you.
Q&A, questions?
Yeah,
Absolutely, yes.
I just had a quick question. You mentioned peer reviews. Is that your academic peers or other people in the health assessment study peers? Who do you mean?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you. They're actually blinded to us. So with academic research and publishing, we submit our findings to a journal. With this study, we're aiming for open access journals so that you can read the results without having to pay or go to the library. And we aim for the highest impact journals. So there's kind of like the newspapers, right? There's some that are well reputed and others that are not. So we aim for the highest impact journals. And we submit our findings, and we don't know who the reviewers are, but they have been handpicked by those journals to critique our work and determine if it's publishable or not, if they see any major issues with how it's been conducted. And oftentimes they require us to do new analysis, like with the birth outcomes thing. So this is what we like to think of as ironcladding our results. It means that an independent experts in our field,
Okay,
yes, have reviewed.
thank you.
Did I read that right? That there's a hip to height and weight ratio?
Yes.
So I could be shrinking because of this?
Some of the toxins influence body fat and the deposition of fat. So it's a measure. Do the hip to the waist to hip ratios is one way of seeing if there's differences in fat accumulation in house populations.
Microphone, please.
Sorry. Yeah, it's some of the things that people were exposed to can influence the deposition of fat, and the abdomen is the place where that tends to be stored. So we do an external measure that's complemented then by the lipid profiling that we do.
Thank you for the great presentation. So in addition to the birth rates being up by about 50% higher, the birth rate, you had mentioned in your clinical assessments that we follow, what about cancer and death rates?
So the question was, in addition to the birth outcomes, will the clinical assessments look at cancer and death rates? So we actually have ordered from the state. There's a state cancer registry, and so that's not something that we test individuals for in the clinical assessments. We're looking at we're analyzing the rates of cancer over time. So we will be looking at cancer, and we will be looking at state mortality data as well. And many of the clinical assays that we're collecting, especially like the CB complete blood counts, could be indicators if people are having health conditions that would then prompt them to go to their doctor. And
So do you have any data like that regarding increase in cancer or increase in death rates during this 10-year period at this time?
those are still being analyzed. But we will absolutely present them in the future, yes. How are we doing on time? Yes.
Okay, the health survey, the blue that you indicated, 10 kilometers, is that the area, and do you have a general east and west of that north-south blue, is it like DeSoto and
Yeah.
What's that blue line?
It is meant to be like a ruler kind of that shows 13 kilometers at that lower end. So we are days plume, so the wind does change direction across the different days. So we are sampling, like sending invitation letters across the area, but then what we call oversaturating, oversampling in the areas that were most chronically hit by the plume. And as far as the southern boundary,
The east-west boundary.
East-west.
east-west boundary, the 405 for sure, or 405, I-5 for sure, and in the chemical transport models, which is able to look at all the wind speeds and directions, the plume never seems to cross this mountain range over here into the Simi Valley.
She said up to Simi Valley.
No, it does not appear to cross the mountain into Simi.
So where? Is it Freeway 5 to?
This mountain range,
So.
I'm sorry, I don't, is it the
Is it
Santa Susana Pass? Yeah. So, and the chemical transport model images are on community meeting 5, I believe. And I'm gonna write down that you guys had this question because I completely understand. You wanna know, was I in the risk zone? So we'll get you that.
How far south?
How far south? Well,
Talk about Tarzana.
not much past Chatsworth.
Well, I don't think it's the 101, isn't that the 101, that white line at the bottom?
Yeah, that's the 118 up there, and then the 101 is down there. So, and really the concentration that far south was not high. The most prolonged and intense exposure was, for the most part, north of the 118. So many questions. Okay, I'll do 2 more, and I want to prioritize people that I've never answered questions from before. If that's the woman in the back.
All right, so a lot of our neighbors have moved in the 10 years since the blowout. Are you sending an invitation to homes that maybe people weren't here at that time? Or are you able to?
Yeah, that's a great question. The respondent has to have lived in the area since 2015. So if somebody moved out and they get the invitation, there's a screening, there's some screening questions that they have to verify that they lived in that area during the disaster.
Yes, I have a question. What you said at the very beginning got my attention, that Dr. Jared unfortunately has cancer, was diagnosed with cancer, going through all that. As you said, he was here on ground zero, real time, when it was happening. He was collecting data. We have other firefighters who have cancer, other SoCalGas employees who are diagnosed with cancer. Are you including them in your health assessment? Is Dr. Jared participating in the health assessment?
He is not participating, and we're focused, this study is focused on community members who live here.
Yeah, but they were here at the time and they were exposed to that stuff. And that's one
Because-
example of how dangerous that stuff was at the time.
The things, what we find from focusing this study on community members will tell people who worked here what their exposures could have been as well. So it goes both ways, but people who worked here didn't have the constant exposure.
But the community members, a lot of them moved away. We were relocated. But those people used to come here all the time, gather data. I think they are very important. Dr. Jared is very important. And for him to know his cancer was maybe caused by this monster. Thank you.
I think, so to honor everybody else's time, one more, so it's so hard to pick.
I think that most of us are mostly concerned about the health. So,
That's why they came.
I mean, I personally would really like to hear everybody's concerns and questions too, without us stopping that.
Well, Dr. Nordella is up next, and
Two more.
November 18th.
I will be here, I'll stay for the end.
Can I make a suggestion? Will you please stay?
Yes,
Dr.
absolutely.
Bell,